Keir Starmer has suddenly been drawn into a wave of speculation following remarks made by entertainer Jim Davidson during a private Westminster event. Davidson suggested that footage exists which could cause significant personal challenges for the Labour leader, though no proof has been presented. Reports claim the video is connected to Lord Ali's residence, but nothing has been verified. Insiders have hinted that the matter may have created strain within Starmer's household, fueling further talk across political circles. Despite the chatter, officials in Downing Street have firmly rejected the claims, calling them groundless and without credibility. Yet, curiosity and doubt continue to spread quietly among colleagues and commentators, leaving questions about how long the Labour chief can hold steady under mounting public attention. Being, one of the most beloved TV comedians, how did it feel as the sort of cancel culture rose and the news stopped? How were you perceived differently by the media? I suppose it didn't bother me that much, because I thought it was their problem. I thought it was them that were reportedly seen holding fundraising events at the very same address. Each detail adds weight to suspicions that the full story is being withheld from the public. From the outside, it appears clear answers are being avoided. With mounting questions left unresolved, public distrust only deepens, leaving the government on increasingly shaky ground. I mean, I'd be delighted to interview Lord Ali and ask him all those questions, but the point is, it's not a very good look for Keir, who appears to be in the pocket of Lord Ali. Lord Ali appears to be bankrolling the entire Labour Party. We now find out he gave £60,000 of a loan to Baroness Udin, who was in trouble for trying to claim some accommodation expenses that she shouldn't have claimed. But it was a very long time ago and absolutely nothing to do with Keir or the... No, I know that, but the question now is why is Keir so close to a man who appears to have a bit of a dodgy past? The ongoing issue has been conspicuously absent from debate in Parliament, a silence many see as a deliberate move to avoid exposing Keir Starmer publicly. Public anger has only grown after disclosures of a donation tied to climate policy that was reportedly not declared with full transparency. This has fueled wider concerns about accountability and honesty at the top of Labour's leadership. Trust is slipping away as voters begin to suspect that they are being denied the full picture. While some of the more personal allegations remain unverified, the consistent whispers of secrecy have convinced many that crucial details are being intentionally concealed. Commentators such as Isabel Oakeshott have openly claimed that parts of Starmer's past are being quietly erased by the press. With no direct challenges at Prime Minister's questions, Starmer relies on polished PR tactics, avoiding admissions until pressure becomes unbearable. Because it's really quite easily understood. It's just a rich guy, and I actually make no criticism of him. It seems he's played his hand quite well, spraying money and favours around the very top of this government. And people hate that stuff. And they also recall that the last bunch that were the recipients of this kind of largesse were the Tories, and they were the ones partying in Downing Street and so on. And guess who was on their high horse criticising it all? It was this lot. Keir Starmer's leadership has been thrust into the spotlight once more, this time over his close connection to Lord Ali and the use of a lavish penthouse apartment. What was initially presented as an innocent arrangement has grown into a storm of questions about transparency, privilege and credibility. The controversy began when Starmer defended his stay in Lord Ali's luxury flat, explaining that it was simply to provide his son with quiet space to revise for GCSE exams. On the surface, this explanation seemed straightforward. Yet reports later revealed that the family continued living there for 7 weeks, long after the exams had ended. That timeline has raised doubts, with many asking why such expensive surroundings were necessary for so long, when simpler options could have been chosen. Further whispers suggest Starmer's son may not have been the only one benefiting from the arrangement, with questions now circling about how many family members stayed there, adding to the pressure. Starmer has maintained that the £450 per night rate was properly declared. Critics, however, argue that this figure is far below the property's real value, suggesting the public has not been told the full truth. This has created a damaging narrative. A Labour leader who often speaks against privilege and inequality, while quietly embracing both. Opponents say the contradiction is stark, and the longer the story drags on, the worse it looks. What started as a simple tale about an expensive stay has snowballed into a broader debate over integrity and accountability. At its heart, the controversy is no longer just about one penthouse. It has become a test of whether those who demand fairness are willing to hold themselves to the same standards. For many, that creeping doubt is now impossible to ignore. Lord Waheed Ali is a Labour peer. He's very much been involved in Labour causes. He paid £20,000 towards Keir Starmer's wardrobe and his glasses. For some reason, he needs 6 pairs of glasses, quite bizarrely. But £5,000 worth of clothes for his wife Victoria. Why does his wife Victoria need her clothes paid for? This is very much a bubble story. You know, it's probably an administrative error. They've not registered it in time in the declaration of interest. I think Labour have almost made a non-story a story, which, you know, is terrible. Sir Keir Starmer and his wife Victoria are under growing pressure as questions mount over what critics describe as a culture of privilege, secrecy and avoidance. Newly disclosed filings reveal that Labour donor Lord Waheed Ali provided Victoria with more than £3,000 worth of designer clothing, while Starmer personally received nearly £16,000 in luxury goods. On paper, both were eventually declared to Parliament. Yet the declarations have done little to calm unease. For a household supported by a substantial taxpayer-funded salary, and with Victoria said to be financially secure in her own right, the decision to accept such extravagant freebies has baffled many observers. Starmer's defence that the items were necessary for public appearances rings hollow for critics who argue that the optics contradict his image as a leader for ordinary families. But the clothing controversy is only part of a wider and more damaging narrative. Reports show that the Starmers extended their stay in Lord Ali's £18 million penthouse long after their son's GCSE exams had finished. The original explanation, that the flat offered study space, no longer fits the timeline. This has prompted fresh questions. Who else used the property, and who actually covered the true cost of such an extended stay? Despite mounting demands, clear answers have never been provided. Investigative attempts have often been met with silence, or carefully managed responses that avoid specifics. Together, these issues sketch a picture that goes beyond designer wardrobes and penthouse living. They suggest a leadership increasingly caught between the image it projects and the reality critics believe is being concealed. For many, the silence has become more damaging than the allegations themselves. If there were nothing to hide, straightforward explanations would have ended the storm long ago. Instead, hesitation feeds public suspicion and deepens mistrust. Victoria Starmer has been wearing high-end clothes given to her by a Labour donor. Lord Ali recently gifted her more than £5,000 worth of clothing. He's also given the Prime Minister items worth almost £19,000. Starmer did declare his gifts to Parliament, but not his wife's. The gifts have now been registered after the Prime Minister sought advice, and the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner has rejected calls from the Tories for an investigation. But does it even matter? Yes, he's so rich he can buy whatever he wants. He earned enough money to buy a nice frock for his wife. But it is a bit scummy of him, especially considering the promises that he made. I think he should have donated them to people that need them. If you are the Prime Minister, you should lead by example. Well, I don't think it matters what he wears. He ain't going to look good, is he? MPs are allowed to accept gifts, but they must declare anything which could be regarded as influencing their actions. Foreign Secretary David Lammy said the Starmers had accepted the gifts so they could look their best for the British people. The Prime Minister said, "It's important to have transparency," and insisted the rules are being followed. For many, the real question is simple. Why would someone as well off as Keir Starmer accept luxury perks at all? And why do they so often come from the same source? What started as stories of clothing gifts and a penthouse stay has shifted into concerns about influence. At the centre is Lord Waheed Ali, a key Labour donor whose generosity raises doubts about whether kindness alone explains it. Critics argue that repeated benefits from a major donor inevitably spark suspicion of strings attached. Inside Westminster, MPs are quietly uneasy, fearing the issue could spiral into scandal. For the public, trust is at stake. Each week, another revelation emerges. And without clear answers, the silence only deepens the perception of secrecy surrounding Starmer's leadership. Lord Ali is now in a very different position to the last time we spoke. because he's now being investigated by the House of Lords. And it's also been uncovered that he's been jet-setting around the world, visiting the Middle East and talking to people like President Assad and talking to people in Iraq after the Iraq War. What's all that about? That was a very long time ago, Mike. Oh, sorry. So that doesn't matter then. Why has Lord Wahid Ali chosen to remain silent? If Keir Starmer's advisors had grasped the basics of crisis management, they would have encouraged him to confront the matter directly. Instead, the refusal to speak has sent a troubling signal. Silence rarely reassures. It often suggests that something damaging lies beneath the surface. Could the reality be even more harmful than the speculation already spreading? Each day without answers makes the situation appear darker. The public are not blind to avoidance. They see that refusal to clarify only increases suspicion, leaving many convinced the affair may run far deeper than first believed. This creeping sense of distrust is no longer limited to political insiders or opposition voices. It is spreading among everyday voters who once saw Keir Starmer as a figure of integrity and reform. For a man who built much of his leadership campaign on promises of transparency, fairness and accountability, the current optics are strikingly at odds with that image. The repeated emergence of unanswered questions, unclear timelines, and vague declarations has created a slow erosion of credibility, one that no amount of polished messaging seems able to reverse. What worries many observers is not just the substance of the allegations, but the broader pattern they appear to reveal: a reluctance to confront difficult truths, a tendency to retreat into process, and a reliance on silence in the face of scrutiny. These are traits often associated with the very political culture Starmer vowed to challenge. As pressure mounts from both media and political opponents, the Labour leader faces a critical test of leadership. Each delayed response, each legalistic explanation, and each newly surfaced detail reinforces the perception that something is being concealed. Not necessarily criminal, but certainly inconsistent with the high standards he once claimed to embody. In the current political climate, even the perception of impropriety can be as damaging as the reality. Starmer's critics argue that repeated benefits from a single, influential donor like Lord Ali blur the lines between personal friendship and political influence. The association now touches on everything from wardrobe gifts to housing arrangements to undisclosed meetings, all of which suggest a closeness that raises serious questions about impartiality and governance. Meanwhile, the silence from within Labour's own ranks has become equally telling. Senior figures who might once have come to Starmer's defence have remained noticeably quiet, perhaps wary of being drawn into a controversy that continues to evolve. The absence of vocal support further amplifies the sense that this is not just a media storm, but a problem within the party itself, one that threatens to overshadow Labour's message ahead of a crucial electoral cycle. At the heart of the matter lies a simple, unavoidable truth. Trust in political leadership is fragile. Once broken, it is extremely difficult to rebuild. And for Keir Starmer, every day spent dodging questions or leaning on procedural defences is a day in which that trust slips further away. The public, who had once looked to him as a steady hand in chaotic times, now watches with growing scepticism. Whether or not the allegations ultimately lead to formal consequences, the reputational damage may already be done. Without a clear, honest, and comprehensive response, the cloud hanging over Starmer's leadership is unlikely to dissipate, and may well define his tenure in the eyes of history. For many within Labour, the fear is not just about short-term embarrassment or political fallout, it's about what this ongoing saga signals to voters ahead of a general election. Keir Starmer has spent years repositioning the party as a credible, trustworthy alternative to a Conservative government mired in scandal. Yet now the very standards he used to draw that contrast are being turned back on him. The narrative is no longer about holding others to account, but about his own willingness, or unwillingness, to be held to the same scrutiny. Grassroots members, who had once rallied behind Starmer's promises of ethical reform, are beginning to express quiet frustration. While some still defend his conduct as within the rules, many are asking whether playing by the rules is enough if the spirit of transparency and fairness appears compromised. The idea that Labour could be slipping into the same patterns of political elitism and backroom favouritism that plagued their rivals is deeply unsettling to those who believed they were voting for change. The media, meanwhile, continues to peel back new layers. Each revelation, no matter how minor in isolation, adds to a cumulative perception that important facts are being withheld. The luxury penthouse stay, the designer clothes, the failure to declare gifts on time, the deep financial ties to a single donor, all of it suggests a lifestyle and political relationship that feels out of touch with the daily struggles of ordinary citizens. Critics argue that Starmer cannot champion working-class values while appearing to benefit from the privileges of a wealthy elite. Opposition MPs are increasingly capitalising on the disarray. Questions are being raised in interviews, parliamentary sessions, and committee meetings, pushing Starmer further into defensive territory. Calls for formal inquiries have grown louder, and although they have yet to gain legal traction, the political damage is already being done. Even friendly journalists and commentators are beginning to shift tone, from cautious support to subtle but clear concern. What's particularly striking is the strategic failure in managing the fallout. Had the Labour leadership addressed the concerns openly, providing direct answers and full documentation early on, the story may have lost steam. Instead, the slow drip of information, often released only after media pressure or public backlash, has given the controversy renewed life at every turn. In crisis management, perception is reality. And right now, the perception is that Starmer is not being fully honest. As the weeks drag on, the once clear lines between political rumour and public interest are becoming blurred. At stake is not just Starmer's reputation, but the credibility of the entire Labour platform. For a party that has framed itself as the voice of fairness and moral clarity, these revelations and the reluctance to confront them head-on risk alienating exactly the kind of voters Labour needs to win back. They're wrong. They're mad. I didn't really bother. Jim Davidson has shown no sign of stepping back. After claiming to have seen the disputed footage, he described it as disturbing, giving his words added weight. The controversy has now shifted toward questions about Keir Starmer's financial backers. Pressure continues to mount for him to disclose the identities of Labour's most influential donors. Rather than offering clear answers, he has pointed to party rules and internal guidelines. Once viewed as a leader of openness, Starmer now faces growing suspicion. Each vague reply fuels speculation, with critics suggesting that something larger is being kept from public view, leaving doubts hanging over Labour's leadership. Why haven't you declared all the major donors who are funding your leadership campaign? Well, at the beginning of the campaign, the Labour Party set out the rules that we should all comply with, and I'm following those rules. But that's process. Well, you're following the process. But there's a bigger principle at stake. That Labour Party members who are being asked to vote for you should know who's bankrolling your campaign. That is why the Labour Party set up those rules. Exactly. But the other candidates in this contest have published who is bankrolling their campaign. You seem to be hiding behind this process. Why won't you simply tell us tonight who are your 5 biggest donors, Andrew? Starmer grows noticeably uneasy whenever tough questions are raised, often trying to steer attention elsewhere. Yet the scrutiny over Labour's funding is only intensifying, with critics demanding full disclosure. He once pledged to deliver absolute clarity in politics, but many now doubt where the money truly comes from. On immigration, Starmer usually leans on rehearsed lines, legal phrasing, and selective figures that shape the debate in his favour. However, the latest round of blunt and relentless questioning left him visibly shaken. For the first time, he appeared cornered and uncertain. As a former prosecutor, he promised to restore integrity inside Westminster. Instead, critics argue he now appears entangled in the very doubts he once vowed to dispel. And that is, for me, possibly the worst and most damaging aspect of this story. This is a guy who is leading our country, who is the representative of the United Kingdom at the United Nations. He's not the head of state, but he's, the leader of the nation. He has lived a complete lie. I've said earlier today on the show, I don't know what he gets up to with Lord Ali. I don't know what he does for hours and hours on end, at this flat that they seem to be happy to share. Public frustration with Keir Starmer and the Labour Party is steadily rising as new reports draw him closer to Lord Ali and the controversial use of a luxury penthouse. To many, this no longer looks like oversight, but rather a calculated effort to shield Starmer from deeper examination. The association with Lord Ali, particularly claims that the penthouse hosted high-profile political meetings, has captured growing attention. The situation escalated further when senior Labour figures, including Wes Streeting,